on priorities. It's a workshop, so we won't say the Pledge of Allegiance again. But I do think it's important, Commissioners, and I shared some thoughts in the initial draft about some of our priorities for 2024-2026, meaning our 2-year term on the commission. I think the last commission got quite a lot of work done, but I think we need to be intentional about some of the things that we aim to accomplish on behalf of our citizens. One of the priorities, and these are generally in the order that I think I got feedback and that I thought, but I'll just read sort of the top 10, and then I'll pause and see if you all have other things that you want to include or modify on that. So things that I thought would be important: expanding the role of Board of Commissioners with respect to the Planning Commission. So I've shared with you some of my thoughts about that. It will require a change in our municipal code to be able to have planning commissioners approved by the Board of Commissioners, but some communities do it that way. So in some places the mayor gets to appoint, but in other communities there's a more explicit role for the Board of Commissioners, and so that'll require changing our municipal code on 2 hearings. But that's one that I thought, that I heard that we wanted to do. Second one would be to complete the update of the community plan. I think this is pivotal. It's one of the most important things that we have undertaken for the future of Townsend, is completing the update of the community plan. We are in the section now that we've sort of landed on a provisional vision statement that we're really going to accelerate the work of that group, and I think address a number of these concerns about where do things go in Townsend, what are we doing about some of the different zoning types, how will we react to the current status with some of those things. So I think the community plans would be one of my priorities as well. Review and update as needed city administrative organization and staffing. So the city has grown quite a lot over the last 10 or 15 years. We've added positions and added a whole lot of functions for our city staff to do. And so I think working on our city administration and organization and staffing would be really important to accomplish. So that would be updating all the position descriptions, with the exception of the police. I think the police are probably in pretty good shape at this point, but I think that's what that would entail, as long in addition to a lot of policies and procedures around things like timekeeping and attendance, purchasing, performance reviews, and things of that nature. Review and update the process for city budget formulation and implementation. So as it goes now, of course, we utilize last year's budget to help formulate the next year's budget, but we go through with a series of budget amendments, and I think it would be good to try to be a little bit more intentional about our budget cycle. What kind of things do we need to plan for? Salaries are, for our city staff, are one of our biggest budget outlays, but also equipment. So we outlay a lot for equipment, and then for other projects. As you all know, we are running largely on sales tax and some other types of things. We don't have a property tax. I've heard from our residents that they're not interested in that. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we're going to stay within our budget. If sales tax increase, we need to be sure that we're saving too in our reserves for a rainy day, and being able to implement those things. So a more intentional budget process, and I've got some ideas about that. Review and revise existing ordinances. This is really important. I think we've heard the sign ordinance, lighting ordinance, other things that have opportunities to update and review those. We can't stay still in reviewing our current ordinances, and I welcome your thoughts on which ones, particularly ones that might be lacking. If we wanted to establish additional ordinances that might serve our citizens. Review the charges and membership of existing committees. We are so blessed to have additional committees. We've got all kinds of new groups that are helping us, but I think it makes sense to review those charges and make sure that we've got the memberships, and that as a city council, we understand what we're asking all of these volunteers to do. If there are other committees that we need, we could identify those at that time. We've also had some great discussion about infrastructure projects. As you know, we've acquired the Special People's Park. It's a real asset for our community, but it requires some infrastructure. We've also got some other projects sort of on the border of our community, like the Swinging Bridge over to Dark Island. Had a number of folks reach out and contact us about that. We don't sort of have the right provisions for that bridge being within the bounds of the city. And so we would have to have some discussion or a number of things in place in order for the city to be able to assist with infrastructure improvements. I think we could do it, and maybe we ought to undertake that, but we need to, be focused on several of these different infrastructure projects I just highlighted too. Review and update city administrative procedures, I mentioned that, and then record-keeping systems. We need to standardize and digitize our records. When we make our decisions, we need to capture those decisions and make sure that we have things in place to be able to record our decisions, and then review city communications, update and expand as needed to increase transparency, such as the city website, social media, and other recordings. And I know Commissioner Martin had to go, and so I think we will also entertain some thoughts. Commissioner, maybe you can help me with some of the items that Commissioner Martin had.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll pause there and see if there's other reflections, things that you'd like to share on those priorities. Is there something missing on that, or things that you'd like to ask question or modify?
I was making notes the whole time you were talking, so I don't know if you want my notes now or later. When you say expand the role of the Board of Commissioners with respect to the Planning Commission, I know what you meant was about the fact that the Planning Commission members are appointed by the mayor, can be removed by the mayor, and the city commissioners have no say, and you'd like to see that change.
Right.
I would like to see an additional change. I would like to see that any action on a site plan by the Planning Commission, since they aren't elected officials, have to be reviewed and approved by the city commissioners before it's final.
Okay. And do we have any examples? Is this done in other communities?
I'm sure I can find them. I didn't spend time looking at it. I just wrote it down.
Okay. I think that'd be good to, we can explore that. The only challenge I would see potentially in doing that is just making sure we've got the bandwidth
Yes.
to do it.
But if we spend time in city commission meetings approving festivals that affect us for a weekend, it seems like we should have time to approve site plans that affect us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And I would just note, sort of building on that point, that the site plans that come to the city commission are for the business zone, not for residents.
Right.
And so these are ones that are coming for business. Okay, I think we can add that.
Think about it.
Yeah, okay.
Want me to go on?
Unless Commissioner Satterfield.
Let him go on.
Okay.
This is more of a question. On number 2, you said complete the update of the community plan. Do we expect the community plan group to make suggestions or policy about zoning?
The community plan, when it's provided to the Planning Commission, will have recommendations on policy, on land use policy. That's one of the sections. And so that's within the scope of their task, is to provide a version that has taken that into consideration for consideration by the planning.
So it'll be more than just a generalized statement. It'll be more about, for instance, zoning.
Right, yeah, there could be quite specific things. If you look in there now, there's some quite specific things, and that's what I think we need in that community.
Kind of like what Kim was talking about, since East Tennessee Development is involved in the community planning process, he talked about potential overlays that might be included and like a recommendation that the city might want to consider at some point.
One of the ways that we will get from the current state to the future state might be to use things like overlays. And then when a site plan would come to the planning commission, one of the things that they would have to consider is, does this fit within sort of what we want the future state to look like? And so it's a way to get community buy-in on what it looks like. It's not the only way. Overlays are not the only way, but that would be an example.
So just for an example, will the community plan group be so specific as to recommend that all vacant properties along Little River be zoned R1? Will they be able to be that specific?
I think they could be.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, they could have quite specific recommendations that would then be,
Yeah,
you know,
they're just
questioned or revised by the planning commission. Planning commission to take a look at that and say, hey, that's not feasible, or that's really is feasible, or planning commission might say, you know, did you think about doing something else with those properties? So the role of the community plan advisory committee is just to provide a starting point. So they are working with the input from the community and the consultants, people that are, you know, ETDD, and they will provide a set of recommendations. And then it's really the job of the planning commission to say, yes, we think that this is what we want to do, or no, we want to do something else.
Okay. Number 5 and 6 to me are hand in hand, but I'm just going to say some specifics. Existing ordinance like B1, B2, B3 ordinance needs serious thought and revision from my point of view. I want to make sure that's said. The other thing I think we're not zoning, we're not regulating correctly is overnight rentals. I think we could have ordinances that put certain requirements on overnight rentals, safety requirements, health requirements, parking requirements, all kinds of things on permits.
I was gonna say permitting.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, but we need to take a serious look at what kind of regulations overnight rentals need. And the final thing is we found that the definitions in the zoning ordinances quite rarely are bad. I mean, when you can take a campground and define it as a hotel, then there's a real problem with your definitions. Okay?
Yeah.
And then the final thing I wrote was on number 8. To me, the infrastructure project's the most important one we got. And it's important to businesses, it's important to tourists, and it's important to residents, is the swinging bridge. We need a serious plan to work on it, not just talk about it. And
You're talking about the swinging bridge to Dark Island.
yes,
Okay.
to me, it's just a real problem not having it open. It can't be as complicated as people want to make it out. We can get an engineering firm to make recommendations. We can get money one way or the other to fix it, and we can get it back open. I'm not a structural engineer, but I just really don't think it's as difficult as. Now, the ownership's another deal, but I think a discussion with Blount County Mayor, Blount County Highway Department can get that lined out, and Blount County Legal can get that ironed out. I just think it takes a serious effort to get that done, and it's not that hard.
Well,
Those are my comments.
Okay, I think I agree. I would have swinging bridge on my list of infrastructure project. I think it will take some discussion with the county, because one side of that mooring is in the county, the other side, but it's on private property. And so legally, I don't think we can expend city funds on something that's not necessarily in the city, but there might be a way we can put in place the right arrangements. So, and especially if we were going to partner with Blount County or something for the benefit of those residents, I think that's really important. So it's a little bit complicated, but it is something that's important.
And I'll be happy to be involved in those discussions with Blount County.
Okay. And I see we have Blount County Commissioner here like that.
Help me write it and I'll take it.
Okay,
The county fixed both bridges not that long ago
Right.
because of public outcry, and the public will outcry again to fix this one. Help me write it and I'll take it. And I'm pretty sure Jeff and Brad would be on board as well.
yeah,
I can't
okay.
imagine either one of them not
Yeah.
being on board, but if you'll help write it, I'll bring it.
Thank you very much. I think that's right. It needs to be something that the city takes up with the county. So, and the county has a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience and resources.
We got a good fund balance too, so this is something that's worth spending it
Can you put that in writing?
Okay,
That's my list.
okay. Mr. Satterfield.
Pat, one of the things you already mentioned, because I had a couple of residents email me over the last few months regarding short-term rentals. And they did send me some samples from close by towns, neighborhoods, that we could also look at, so that may be a separate workshop. You know, we want to discuss certain things. Instead of, I don't want to have if we're gonna have a workshop, let's focus on one or two things at a time and really spend time on it. I know this is key priorities, so that I'm not talking about this one, but I'm saying when we move along, we go through, if we have a workshop on short-term rentals, that's a growing business. Even in the last 5-6 years, short-term rentals have just boomed around here. They really have. One of the things also that a couple of residents have came to me about is regarding yard sale signs. Because I believe the way it's written right now is Tim in here? Tim, okay. I believe the way it's written right now is that you're not allowed to have a yard sale sign in on somebody else's property, that it has to be on the premises of the yard sale. Well, if your neighbor is okay with, like, if you have a neighbor that's out in front of you that might be more visible to the road, then if your neighbor gives you permission to have a yard sale sign in their yard, so that it's more visible for people to stop by instead of in the back, you know, on the back road where you can't see it. That's just something that's been brought to my attention about maybe yard sale signs, and maybe coming to City Hall and getting a permit for 3 or 4 days and paying a fee to have a yard sale sign on somebody else's property. He was just throwing out ideas at the time, so that is one thing that was brought to my attention. One that was brought to my attention a few days ago were if it would be possible for us to get mirrors in the tunnels for the bike trail. Mirrors to be able to see people coming through the tunnels and coming out of the tunnels. I know, because not everybody rides a traditional bike, so some of them actually sit kind of low to the ground. And if you're coming through a tunnel, and some places are pretty steep, you know, you might come around a curve and somebody might be coming out, and there might be, you know, just for safety reasons, one of the things that was brought up was if we could get mirrors in the tunnels. This one's a big one, grant writing. There's grants out there that we're missing out on right now because, and I'm not saying that, you know, like for example, Parks and Rec couldn't do, because we have submitted grants before, but I think it would be beneficial to us to have some additional help. So Gayla did give me a contact for a gentleman from East Tennessee Development. His name's Chris, and I believe that's what he does, is helping with grant writing. So I was gonna reach out to him because we already pay East Tennessee Development for their services. So that could be an additional one, but grants.
Yeah, I like that.
And then the last one for me was that driveway permit. I think it needs an additional workshop. I think it needs I think it's, the way I'm reading it right now, I think it's excessive. I think that the driveway permit just needs to be for driveways. I don't think that the excavating and the grading is, there's just some components of the way that it's reading right now that I feel like is a little excessive for Townsend, and I think we need to look at it some more.
Okay.
And maybe just focus on a driveway permit for now.
Okay.
It's interesting, I went to a New Year's Eve party, and the two things I got hit with multiple times was one, that the grading permit seemed totally excessive to these individuals, considering where it started with a driveway cut. It seemed like it went overboard. The second one is the signs. People think we're being really petty about the signs for yard sales, bake sales, that kind of stuff. So maybe there's some room there that can do. And there was one more. The overnight rental thing was just, there's a lot of opinions out there about overnight rentals, both for and against. And I heard a lot about that at this New Year's Eve party.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can summarize.
Sorry, we just
what-
dumped a lot of stuff on you.
Yeah.
what you all have added to this list of priorities. Site plan approved by the city commission, so that would be an additional function. We can talk with the planning commission about that, and we can look to see. So I'm happy to add that one in as we talk about expanding the role of the Board of Commissioners. Add that in. I think we're going to need probably a workshop or something around there. I think it will require some changes to our municipal code to do, to have the Board of Commissioners approve it. I think that's pretty straightforward. What I also heard is resetting the Board of Commissioners. So, in other words,
Resetting the Board of
the
Commissioners.
the Planning Commission. No, we can't do that with we can't do that with the Board of Commissioners. No, resetting the Planning Commission. And so what that would mean, while all these planning commissioners serve at the pleasure of the mayor, you would ask them all to resign, and then we would go through an exercise like we went through tonight, to, reset that board, with the input of the Board of Commissioners. So I think that will require some additional discussion. I think there's, I've heard that said that would be, there's pros and cons to that. So I'd like to have some additional discussion about that. It's important that we maintain sufficient experience on that group for them to do their job, but it's also important that that group is representative of the community and takes into.
Sure.
And I think we'll ultimately get there, if we have, as those positions turn over. It's just a matter of, how fast you want that to happen. So,
You want some diversity on these boards too. Because I felt like there was a lack of maybe female representation on planning commission and BCA. So I felt like, I think that while some people may see that as being biased because I'm a woman, but I feel like it's important to have both.
well, I think it's important that, we have our boards and committee that, reflect and represent our community.
Sure, yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure there's, at least 50% women in our community. So, okay. Before we get in trouble on that one, let me see if I can summarize some other things that I heard. We need to have a workshop to talk about B1, B2, B3, and I would second that. I think we have had some experience now with B3, and I think, it raised some questions. Maybe we thought we knew how it worked, but maybe there's some opportunities to see I think the intention was right. The intention was to provide a mechanism to get more community input. And currently, with site plans, not coming back to the Board of Commissioners, there's no opportunity for that community input. That was part of the intention. Maybe if we made this change, as you suggested, that would get that opportunity for community input. So, but I think having a workshop and having some more discussion on that, I think would be beneficial. The other thing that I think in that workshop I would like to revisit is making sure that people can build a home in there.
Yes.
I think it's important to be able to encourage full-time residents in Townsend and every opportunity we get to make sure that we have an opportunity for folks to live here, should be provided. With eyes wide open that if you build a home in a business district, your neighbors are likely to be businesses. So you should know that. I think that the discussion that we had when we took residences out of the business was that the intention of the zoning was to make those things compatible on their interface. But I think given the size of Townsend and things like that, we might, want to take another look at that.
We can talk about it further when you have but one of the concerns I heard was I have a house in a business district and it burns down. They've been told they can't rebuild the house. Well, so somehow we got to accommodate either yes or no on that kind of thing.
Well, I think what we understood is they would be grandfathered in. So if you already had a residence in that business, but it's not explicit.
Right.
So we either need to be explicit, and if we put homes back in there,
Yes.
then there wouldn't be any question
Right.
about that. So things in that workshop I'd like to discuss as well.
More residences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and I hear you on the overnight rentals. I think that really begs for a whole workshop itself. I think other communities are similarly discussing that. Priority on the infrastructure projects for Swinging Bridge. Special People's Park, that would be another one, be pretty high on that list, and that one's clearly within our remit.
Gayla, have we had any RFQ submissions on that yet? Okay, they have till the 31st for now is the deadline, but if we need to extend it, we could. So.
I think these would be among the higher priorities, the Planning Commission, the B123 workshop, overnight rental workshop. Yard sale signs, I think there probably is some opportunity there, especially like for the bake sales. We were pretty clear before that there's not supposed to be any signs in the right of way. So I don't think we're ever going to be in a position to say that it's okay to put a sign in the right of way unless it's needed for public safety or something like that.
Yeah.
But in the situation like you described, or maybe there are other situations where we need to make sure that our community can continue to be able to do the normal things like have a bake sale or have a yard sale. If there's some more common sense things there, I think that's an opportunity. On bike trails, I wanted to get your thoughts on something else. One of the things that I've heard a number of folks, mentioning to me is the speed of e-bikes, and that with e-bikes on the bike trail, they're quiet and they're fast. And I think we might, as we're thinking about the bike trail, we need to probably think about modernizing. There is a speed limit on there now. I don't know what we need to do in terms of enforcement. I believe there is a speed limit.
But what is it?
I've never seen
Never
it.
Is there not?
Never
I've never
seen it.
seen it.
No.
Maybe I'm thinking
Now, I
about
know it's e-bikes are limited to 20 miles an hour, but I've never seen a speed limit.
I thought we had a speed limit on the bike trail. I'll have to go back and look and see.
No, there's just a sign that says all-purpose trail and it says no motorized
Uh-huh.
vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay.
And e-bikes are in three categories. 1 and 2 are under 20 miles an hour, and they can go anywhere bicycles can go legally.
Okay.
Class 3 can go up to 30 some odd mile an hour, and they have to be licensed the same as a moped or something.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, Commissioner Jenkins, sounds like you've got some experience there.
Yeah.
Maybe
I've
you
read a
can,
couple. I
you
mean,
can lead our,
20 miles an
We
hour.
got licenses in one county, there's not a thing that's one county per state street.
all right, but I would like to go back and look at safety on the bike trail specifically. I think e-bikes, have a lot of pros to them. They allow people that might not ordinarily be able to get out and use the bike trail. So I think, we got
Part of
this.
that might be the bike trail needs to be wider. I don't know.
Well-
There are lots of possibilities there.
But I think this is a new thing that has happened, and people are writing to me and asking me about e-bikes on the bike trail. So,
Perhaps a line, e-bikes only. on a
yeah,
portion.
we've seen some trails that have like a line, pedestrians, walkers here, bikes here. So maybe that's another alternative, but I would like to sort of address that.
But 20 miles an hour on an e-bike and against a pedestrian, that's very fast.
That would be very
That
bad.
would be very fast.
Yeah, so-
20 miles per
All
hour.
right, well, you can come to that.
I will be there for that one, because I do both.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good opportunity, for folks to get out, but we want to keep people safe too, so.
Have we had bicycle pedestrian accidents on the bike trail?
For as long as I can remember, there's always interactions between bikes and pedestrians on the bike trail.
No, I have interaction, but have there been any accidents?
Accidents, well, my guess is,
The mirrors would be wonderful for that too,
yeah,
because that is one spot that would make a big
So
difference.
obviously a workshop would be important.
yeah, I think it works out. I can't answer you directly.
I think there's been like a near miss,
Yeah.
according to some of the social media groups. There's
Okay.
one.
And I think also in regard to the bike trails, I think we need to make sure that they're marked, these intersections are marked. The one that I see the most frequently is one of the Old Tuckaleachee Road. And, if they're not marked, they need to be marked better. Some of the markings, have started to fade, I think, a little bit.
Also, if you're going to draw a line, take into account that some of us ride electric tricycles and they're wider than bicycles.
Yeah, all right. Tricycles. So tricycles. All right.
Well, I
You
have
can
two
see
of
that.
them.
All right. All right.
So workshops.
Well, come to the workshop, tell us about
10 miles.
electric tricycles.
I think a speed limit of 10 miles per hour is fine.
Well, yeah, one of the things I think, we have to be cognizant of is that there's more permutations of these things than we can ever expect. So we have to have some common rule, and whether it's speed or size or, drawing lines, but.
Well, then the local rental companies should also be giving out those instructions when you rent.
Oh, and that's why a workshop is a good opportunity, because they're, getting a lot of information about it as they run them. So, okay, Commissioners. And then the driveway permit, I think that one's gonna come back to us anyhow.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Hedrick was gonna give some input on that one, and that one's gonna come back. I will say that, I am anxious for this one to move, because, I've had some folks write into me, and I'm concerned as well, about anybody just being able to make a cut anywhere on any day of the week and on any street in the city. And I don't think that's right. And I think it also provides, my understanding in a conversation with TDOT, is having some regulation on the book provides us an opportunity to interact with TDOT. And so when they get a driveway or a road cut permit, I'm not sure that they sort of automatically consider what our regulations are, because they don't think we have any, and we don't. But it provides a better mechanism for us to coordinate with TDOT. And you have heard some discussion about a corridor management plan. And I recognize we have a diversity of opinion on a corridor management plan. But one of the things, you don't have to look to some community, you don't have to look very far to some communities to see why a corridor management plan might be advantageous, and particularly because we are a corridor. So I think the Planning Commission will come with some recommendations on that. But I know the driveway road cut permit has come to the Board of Commissioners, so I think that's going to come back to us. It's not going to go back to Planning Commission. I think it's going to get improved Commissioner Hedrick's input and ETDD, and then it will come back to Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, I wasn't like, I'm not against it, because I think that the driveway permit is necessary. There was just some components about, like you couldn't clear more than 25% of your property within a 5-year period or something, and that really didn't make a lot of sense to me, like why we would put something like that in. If there's a reason for it, I'd like to know, but, you know, just some more clarification on it, I think, you know, for me, I think if somebody wants to clear their property, they should.
I think it was way too cumbersome for what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
Let me see if I had any other things on my list to get feedback on, and I'm happy to open it up for additional feedback, so y'all can be thinking in the audience if you want to provide any feedback on our priorities. Under the mural subcommittee, we are working to see about the situation with respect to the tunnels. So there's quite a number of considerations with the tunnels. And we are in discussion with TDOT to renew our licensing agreement for the right-of-way property. And so one of the things that we're discussing with TDOT is about the tunnels. And so when we do that, you know, murals is another thing. What's the process for mural applications? And so I think that's another one that
I got a basic question about murals. When does this committee meet and who's on it?
it meets ad hoc as they have applications. And the members of the mural committee are Holly Whitehead, John McMahon, and Julie Little-Welch.
Okay.
So as they get,
It just seems to be going under, from my viewpoint, it's kind of under the radar.
well, it comes back under this thing of making sure the Board of Commissioners know the charges and the membership of the existing committees. If you only meet ad hoc, like BZA, you know, it's a reasonable question. You know, when do they meet? Well, I think BZA now has a regular meeting time after the Planning Commission. But that has created some confusion, I will say. And one of the things I'll mention as well is making sure that we have adequate documentation and lead time. So one of the challenges with sort of the BZA deciding to meet right after the Planning Commission is that it creates the perception that you can get a decision at the Planning Commission and immediately take it the next hour to BZA and have something, you know, transpire. Same thing, we ran into the dates recently with Board of Commissioners and Planning Commission. And so depending on how the Tuesday and Thursdays fall, there may not be adequate time, 10 days being sort of our general rule of thumb, for Board of Commissioners to have adequate time to review something that comes from the Planning Commission. So when we look at these meetings and set our rules for when we have to have documentation and time, we really need, I mean, it's not fair to tell people to do their homework if you don't give them time to do it. And so we need to be really following our rules on making sure that when something is coming from one council or committee, there's adequate time for that next body to be able to review it.
At the county level, we get the agenda for the various committees and that packet as part of our regular packet for our homework, anticipating all of it coming from that committee rather than getting caught up in those days. And we actually get things from our budget committee that happen 30 minutes before the meeting almost every month. So
How do you feel about that when you get something 30
well,
minutes?
so I mean, they just include it on our agenda
Okay.
as anticipated to be forwarded from the budget committee and listed all there for us to do the homework anyway. And then we get a vote tally from the budget committee, if it was 5-0, or if it was 4-1, or it was 0-5. I mean, we get the vote tally. Everything comes to us that goes before the budget committee to to actually vote on. The budget committee either forwards it with a recommendation that we approve or a recommendation that we don't approve. And it helps avoid that 10-day nightmare just by letting it be part of your packet. And you all know what's coming before your other committees. So, I mean, you can just put that in your agenda and make life a whole lot simpler, I believe.
I think we could look at the county and Maryville and Alco and see if there's some best practices that we could adopt. But it's important for commissioners to have enough time to look at stuff and make sure that, you know, everybody understands what the rules are. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else while we're together here.
I really need to go, and I'd like to say a couple
Oh,
of things.
okay, well, you go right ahead, Mr. Aker, while I'm reviewing my list.
So-
It's a workshop, we're less formal.
Your review, your meeting concerning your overnight rentals is an excellent idea. The county has taken steps recently to where they're going to be taxing overnight rentals as commercial properties instead of residential properties, the way they've always been done. And it's an excellent opportunity for you to get with the tax roll folks, get with Mr. Orr and get that information or share information back and forth to do that. That is an excellent opportunity for you all to have some revenue and address maybe some safety concerns like Mr. Jenkins brought up. I mean, it's a really good idea. And the other thing I wanted to say, I've about gapped out and forgot now.
I can't believe you're speechless. I can't believe you're speechless.
Well, we give each other some grace on that, so if you think of it.
I just did, the driveway permit thing, a driveway permit's absolutely stellar idea. You need to do that. You get money for it, it establishes a record, everybody knows where it has to be, the guidelines for it. The thing that I was outspoken in the meeting about was the other page and a half of stuff that didn't belong on something titled driveway permit. Driveway permit's wonderful. All those other restrictions, I'm absolutely 100% opposed to. But you've got TDEC requiring the soil conservation, the silt catching, all of those things that were being spelled out in that document that already exist. You don't need a redundant Townsend law, but you do need a driveway permit just to keep somebody from cutting it wherever they want to. And it's a good opportunity to collect a couple $300. I mean, you can get good money for the permit. And thank you all for your time. Do reach out to me on the bridge. I will definitely bring that before the commission. It's a big deal. It's a tourist attraction, and we need that kind of stuff happening. And it flew through with flying colors last time. I wouldn't anticipate a problem.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, commissioners, I did have one other thing on here that I thought was really important that I wanted to bring up. I had it under infrastructure. Emergency management and response. This comes from, of course, the hurricane and the tragedy on the other side of the mountain, our neighbors. I would like to have a workshop and to prioritize working together with the county about their continuing operations and our emergency plan. I mean, literally, but for the grace of God, this could have easily been us, and our hearts are still thinking about our neighbors. But you know, we are in a corridor, I won't say it's a canyon. I don't know if that's true, but it's, you know, the little river is something that could come up, and we need to, you know, understand and plan for it. And when something like this happens, the mayor, vice mayor, board of commissioners, chief of police, city manager, we all need to know what's supposed to happen. And so we were watching as the river level was rising, and we had certain thresholds that at a certain threshold, certain things would happen. But I'd like to review that so that everybody has a clearer picture of what's going to happen, and maybe we have some information that we share with our citizens too. Because that river, I was in contact with Blount County as we were watching that, and they, were guiding on what's in their plan, what happens at a certain stage. But we need to make sure people are well informed, because that water comes up quickly. And there's only two ways out of this area. We have high ground, fortunately, but there's only two ways out. And so if that bridge over to Wares Valley, or the road out Hatcher's Cut, becomes blocked, there's not a lot of other ways. I guess you go up over Rich Mountain and try to go out Parson Branch or something. But bottom line is, I would like to spend a little bit of our time, and I think that's something that would be worthwhile to prioritize. If you're-
I think some other things could come out of that meeting, I don't know, priorities or not priorities, procedures for what citizens ought to do, where they
Yeah.
ought to head, and hopefully we'd never need it. But when you watch what happened, and just being on high ground didn't save people in those flood areas, because
Yeah.
the mud took them out. So just having high ground doesn't save a lot of people here in town. So I think you're right. There could be things come out of that we can't even imagine. And I think being coordinated with Blount County is really important, because there's no sense them doing one thing and us doing another.
Right, okay. I'll put that on the list.
Agree. I was thinking about, the grant that we applied for with AARP, and I think that they're opening back up applications soon, is a couple of towns as far as for emergency medical equipment and stuff, like in the event that the power goes out for a lot of people, you've got elderly folks on oxygen and they might not have a backup, they might not have a generator. Some cities will keep some of those backup generators for, prioritize people in the community that need oxygen and they can't get it. That's just an example.
Yeah.
But that is important to think about.
Yeah, all right, well, with your concurrence, then I'll add that to our list of priorities.
Yeah.
What I'd also like to do is to put some of this stuff on a timeline.
Okay.
So you've given me guidance tonight, and what I'd like to do is I'll come back to you. I'll take into account all your feedback, and I'll start to put some of this on a timeline so that we can try to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and getting it accomplished in the next 2 years. Now, some of it might necessarily need to roll over, but if we don't plan what we're going to do in the next 2 years, we will be reactive and we won't get it done.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
That sounds good to me.
okay. Any other feedback before we conclude? Any other public input? Mary Kate?
Regarding the murals, I think people come to Townsend to see the landscape and the mountains and the trees and the sky and the stars at night. And we start putting murals on stuff everywhere. It kind of just messes it up, in my opinion. I mean, I don't hate murals. The one that the park guys have on is absolutely one of the best ones I've ever seen. But if we start putting them everywhere, then it detracts from the peace, the visual peace of Townsend. Just like having fireworks at any, at an event, at a festival, it's difficult for people with any kind of seizure disorder. And we know some people that have those. It takes away from the night sky. It's not what the peaceful side is, strobe lights and all that, and it's against our ordinances anyway. So I would hope that we could do something to prevent that from happening and to not have a bunch of murals everywhere.
Well, I think the mural committee was established a little bit out of this notion that there needs to be some input on what happens, because it's visually something that everybody is exposed to.
Yeah.
So while it's something that, a property owner could decide to paint their wall, if they decide to do something like that. I think that was sort of the origin. That didn't happen on my watch, the mural committee, by the way. But it is the opportunity for people to come together and say, do we want a mural right here? Is this mural that's being proposed something that, would be acceptable or not? And it starts to provide a framework for people to have the discussions like you're describing. So somebody could show up and say, I don't think this is a good place for a mural. So, you know, for whatever it is, that some commission before ours decided that it would be good to put a mural committee in place. And so now that's the function, is to have that element of coordination. So
Now, I've got, you know, when you have a mural committee, it makes it sound like you're inviting murals in town.
Yep.
If you had something in your sign ordinances that controlled murals, then you wouldn't necessarily be inviting murals. That's the way I feel.
yeah. Well, I guess that's one approach, is when you have a committee, it might sound like it's to encourage it. But I would say, you know, when we have the community plan, we had sort of the same, you know, comments along that line. Well, if you have a land use and transportation plan, that means that you're trying to encourage land use and transportation and those things. But maybe it's, you know, it's not necessarily that you're trying to encourage, you're just trying to, you know, get a handle and be able to provide a forum for people.
Yes, use
To
could
talk
be
about it.
preservation.
Yeah, but maybe some folks think that that is necessarily trying to encourage it. But, all right. Other feedback? Jeff?
One thing I wanted to mention for a while, it seems like with infrastructure that you sometimes struggle with being able to get an engineer or an architect on a timely basis to look at something like this, the bridge at Dark Island. Have you considered, and I'm sure there's a way that you can do it, have a retainer, architect, engineer, sort of like you have your planner?
Mm-hmm.
They obviously aren't architects or engineers, we'd be going to them to give you some advice on this bridge, but you could, I was part of an architect retainer firm when I was working, and we worked for a school district, and we worked for the university before I started working for the university, but it didn't cost you anything to have them on retainer. You could just go to them, hey, we got a bridge that the neighbor says is swinging, we think we need to close it down. Could you go out there and you know, a proper engineer go out there and take a look at it? They would have a standard contract with you, so you don't have to go through, and it takes months.
I think that's Commissioner Satterfield has been championing this idea of a RFQ. We have a request for qualifications out for.
Is that for a retainer for the city?
Yeah, well, the idea is to establish an architecture firm that could advise us on contract, like you're describing.
But I mean, I'm talking about anything that would come up through the year, not just the
Not
bridge.
just for the park,
Like the city.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be like the city lawyer, like your city planner, you only pay them, and, you know, you contract and you know what the hourly rate is, because they may have a structural engineer, it might take them, say, 8 hours of time,
yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe it's a way
So-
we could expand the RFQ.
because you got a lot of these quick little things, and then you have to go through and get an actual firm to do the whole project.
Right.
That's a whole different timetable, but I see it's sometimes hard to get something done on a timely basis like this bridge, so at least you could tell the public.
I like the idea, because in
That's
this
a good
case,
idea.
in this case, we'd already be moving forward perhaps on the swinging bridge. Perhaps.
That's a perfect example.
If we didn't have the legal issue with Bond County.
I think we
Yeah,
got
that's
to.
a separate.
Yeah, I think we got to
Separate
solve
issue.
the legal issue
Right.
first, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if there was a community, you know, organization would cost us anything. But Commissioner Satterfield, I see you wanted to weigh in.
Well, I think actually, Gayla, I think you spoke to maybe Angie a while back when we were developing the RFQ, because one of the things was, could we just go out and pick an engineering and architect firm? And the deal was, she said that an RFQ, correct me if I'm wrong, that the RFQ was kind of the first step. And then once we have somebody that we've negotiated with and put together a contract with, whatever, then at that point, we could use that person, but you have to have that first step with an RFQ, or what else did she say?
Yeah, well,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
the city of Townsend puts out an RFQ for a retainer architect,
Yeah.
engineer to
Yeah,
cover
yeah.
this next 2 years, not a specific project.
Right.
So because of the bridge, does the county already have a structural engineer on their budget that you could use them for this particular?
Maybe. Yeah, we need to,
I think we ought to look at Jeff's idea.
I think so too.
Whether we get that person on retainer by using an RFQ or not is.
And it doesn't negate what Kelsey's doing specific to the Special People's Park.
Right,
Because you're wanting to get, so when we were the retainer architect, we would do small district, but, because they could call us up, the superintendent could call me up that day, I'd go out there the next day, and whatever they needed, it was a lot of preliminary stuff, usually, like sometimes you have.
Jeff, I'm putting this on my list under infrastructure. I'm calling it, you correct me now, I'm calling it retainer for general architectural services. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, and they're on, they already have a contract, so you don't have to go through the full RFQ to get just some initial small services. And I'm not talking about a project that and they can help you do that, because that would be another probably RFQ. I don't know the Tennessee procurement.
And
Okay.
structural engineer.
I like it.
It's no different than having your planner you can call up, right? Or your lawyer you can meet with, he's keeping his hourly, it's the same thing. It's just an architect and an engineer.
So it's basically one that's pre-selected, on retainer. That's, you know who to call.
Sounds like a good idea, happy to explore it, got it on the list.
Good.
Other good idea, see, that's why we have the citizenry.
The bridge is kind of impending, and if the county already has somebody on a RFQ, maybe you could use them for that bridge because they are part of the owner or something of it. So maybe that could make that go quicker and do that, what he said.
Well, I think from the sound of it, there was a previous effort on that bridge by the county. And so maybe we had to go back and look and see what they did. I wasn't aware that it was on that one, I thought it was on the other one.
Now,
It was on-
this one was almost destroyed during the flood in whatever
The
year,
county came in.
95, whatever.
Mhm.
The county wanted to just abandon it, and the city convinced them to not abandon it, rebuild it. The county budgeted the money, rebuilt it, and that's when the handshake agreement occurred about us doing the maintenance on their bridge, which there's no documentation for other than the hand.
All right,
That's
another reason
We need to
for,
get a written agreement with
Right.
them before we can spend any public funds. to fix the bridge.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that's the reason we need to look.
yeah, we need to be, make sure that we
And what
have.
Mr. Akers suggested is probably a good path.
Okay. All right, sounds good. That's on our priority infrastructure. Okay. Anything else? Thank you all for coming. I know this is still technically holidays, and I'm grateful to Commissioner Hedrick and Commissioner Martin as well. And so thank you all for all that you do. So I will take your feedback and come back to you with
Okay.
these priorities. So, thank you.
that's a really good list to start with, so.
Okay, workshop, so I would just say that we're adjourned. on the
Okay,
workshop.
sure.
All right, thank you very much.